Bueno, voy a empezar, os hablaré un poco en español y un poco en inglés porque quiero que Jacqueline se entere. Bueno, para mí esto no es un evento, para mí es volver a verla, que hace 5 años que no estaba con ella. Ella ha sido mi maestra, ella dice que somos hermanas, yo le digo que es mi madre espiritual. I'm telling them that we are sisters in I don't know what to say, how to say that. Yeah, spiritual sisters. Yeah, let's say that. Bueno, desde el principio que la conocimos, it was my husband who introduced me to Jacqueline, really. The way we did philanthropy changes forever. Cambiamos nuestra manera de hacer filantropía gracias a sus ideas, conocimos lo que era el capital paciente y entendimos otra manera de generar desarrollo distinta a la que habíamos hecho durante casi más de 10 años. Entonces, para nosotros fue un cambio casi de vida, desde luego en la parte filantrópica, que era muy importante para nosotros. Whenever we understand what she was doing, we really realized of the potential of system changing, of what Acumen was doing. And through the years, we are beyond your expectations and beyond our expectations. Todo lo que ha hecho Acumen ha superado un poco la ilusión o las ideas que teníamos de futuro, porque al principio lo vimos siempre muy encajado dentro más de la filantropía y ahora mismo sabéis todos que la inversión sostenible es una tendencia de mercado imparable y la inversión de impacto es un nicho dentro de esto y el capital paciente es lo que es la base para que todo eso que está por encima pueda ocurrir, ¿no? Entonces no os quiero dar más la lata. I leave you with Jacqueline and Luigi that is going to make a sharp interview and then we will have a panel where Jacqueline will discuss with people coming from liquid markets, private equity markets and the education sector to share with her ideas about what is Acumen Academy in Spain and why they decided to sponsor this project in Spain and probably more things. So I leave you with her.
Yes, let's switch them on, para que todo el mundo pueda enterarse. Bien.
También yo quiero decir buenas tardes. Estoy estudiando español finalmente porque quiero hablar con mis amigos aquí, pero en este momento no puedo hablar muy bien. So thank you.
No
But
problem.
I did want to say how happy I am.
No problem. Bueno, Jacqueline, hace 21 años que tú fundaste Acumen y llevas explicando por el mundo de qué va todo esto del capital paciente, la inversión de impacto. Seguro que ha sido un proceso orgánico de crecimiento personal que ha llevado también a que tus ideas cambien al respecto. ¿Qué ha motivado ese cambio y en qué aspectos ha cambiado? Jacqueline, you've been talking about patient capital, impact investing throughout the world for the last 21 years. This, I'm sure, has been a very much an organic process in which you've developed, got to understand more about what you were talking about and especially what needed to be done and how it needed to be done. So your understanding must have changed in the last 2 decades, and I'm sure that some events, some realizations prompted those changes. Tell us about that change.
Thanks, Luis, and you always ask the best questions.
Muchas gracias por preguntarme cosas tan interesantes.
When we first started, we were pretty much the only ones, and so we were true seekers.
Empezamos siendo los únicos y éramos auténticos buscadores en este campo.
And frankly, we didn't really understand where markets worked and where they were limited.
Y no entendíamos en qué ámbitos los mercados funcionaban y en cuáles otros estaban más limitados.
And so I think one of the big lessons was that there are some markets like clean water delivery and primary healthcare.
Y vimos que mercados como la entrega de agua potable y la atención primaria en términos de salud eran mercados donde podíamos trabajar con más impacto.
Where markets can play a role, but where governments must become much more efficient, more importantly.
Y donde la combinación de empresa privada, sector privado y gobierno y administraciones públicas era la clave para que aquello funcionase.
And that there were other markets like energy and agriculture where individuals could see the returns to their own investment, where social entrepreneurs could really make extraordinary difference.
Y nos dimos cuenta de que los emprendedores sociales en mercados como la agricultura, por ejemplo, es donde ese tipo de persona tiene la mayor capacidad de impacto.
But I would say that where we saw patient capital making the most difference was in 4 ways.
Pero donde hemos visto que el capital paciente marca la diferencia es especialmente en estos 4 planteamientos.
One was creating a market that had not existed.
1, crear un mercado que no existía previamente.
So when we made the first investment in off-grid solar, a company called D-Light.
De forma que invirtiendo en una compañía que se llama D-Light, de energía solar fuera de la red, digamos, principal.
Nothing existed for the poor but kerosene and diesel.
Los pobres en aquel momento no tenían más que diésel y queroseno para producir esa energía.
It took them almost 10 years to prove the model.
Y ese modelo empresarial tardó 10 años casi en demostrarse exitoso y rentable.
But now the 40 companies in which Acumen has invested has reached 230 million people with light and solar.
Y ahora tenemos 40 compañías que dan servicio a 230 million people.
230 million.
230 millones de personas de energía solar y agua.
So now there's a market, there's an industry, and impact investors and other kinds of entities can help grow this.
Entonces, habiendo ya creado ese mercado, esa industria, entonces ya es un lugar ya establecido para que emprendedores, capital, entidades puedan colaborar y hacer crecer aquello juntos.
A second big area is in where there's no trust, post-conflict areas where we do a lot of work.
Otra de los ámbitos es lugares donde después de guerras y conflictos se han destruido los vínculos de confianza. Vemos que allí podemos hacer una gran labor nosotros.
And so entrepreneurs have a real desire to make change, but they need the patient capital to build trust, to build capabilities of local people so that they can ultimately succeed.
Evidentemente, los emprendedores sociales que en esos ámbitos quieren crear vínculos de confianza y restablecer necesitan experiencia, capital y relaciones para que aquella labor pueda llevarse a cabo, de nuevo, en ámbitos destruidos por crisis y conflictos.
And the third area would be where government has a role to play, but doesn't have a blueprint for how. So toilets.
La tercera área es aquellos ámbitos donde el gobierno puede entrar a hacer algo, por ejemplo, alcantarillado, ese tipo de conducciones de aguas públicas, pero donde no tiene los planos, la hoja de ruta para llevar a cabo ese tipo de proyectos de ingeniería.
And so again, you need patient capital in building a sanitation system in a slum to make something like that.
Y en los suburbios más pobres, ese capital paciente resulta fundamental para, por ejemplo, construir sistemas de alcantarillado y agua corriente.
And then the final is where I'm so excited now, and you're seeing a lot of the innovation in Latin America.
Y al final, algo que me emociona enormemente, donde estamos viendo mucha innovación en Latinoamérica,
which is where transparency is allowing us to see where the supply chains are broken. So in coffee, in chocolate, where farmers aren't making any money, there's a new generation of entrepreneurs that are building out new kinds of business models that ensure farmers are paid, that there are regenerative practices being used, and it means they have to change the status quo, and that takes a lot of time as well. Again, patient capital has just been extraordinary in making some of those companies work.
Estamos viendo que productores de café y chocolate en Hispanoamérica, lugares donde también la transparencia está haciendo que la acción de los emprendedores sociales sea más fácil en crear y ver cómo funcionan esos mercados, vemos que el capital paciente allí también está siendo, en este cuarto ámbito, fundamental para el desarrollo.
So finally, I would just say, in 20 years, patient capital has become more sophisticated, more targeted, and increasingly as a viable part of the overall impact investing spectrum.
En 20 años el capital paciente se ha vuelto una alternativa más viable, más capaz dentro del abanico de opciones de inversión. El capital paciente en estos 20 años ha conseguido los objetivos que se estaba marcando. However,
That's always make me nervous.
Yes.
However,
le voy a preguntar acerca de si cree que se puede ir, hay opción de ir más allá del capital, de la inversión de impacto social. During my research for this interview, I've listened to you expressing concerns or maybe criticisms about impact investing. So, as it being a model, a way to approach investing that you can do better than that.
well,
There is a beyond impact investing.
in a way, my own life's journey has now mirrored two social movements. The first was micro enterprise.
En mi viaje personal y profesional ha habido dos movimientos. El primero es el establecimiento y desarrollo de microempresas.
Where I saw the beginning, lots of confusion and everybody trying to figure out how to do micro enterprise, and then it got to a point where some micro enterprises were charging 100% interest because they could, and you started to see the sector becoming completely really out of control.
Y eso se descontroló, los créditos, por ejemplo, a pequeñas empresas, en algunos casos incluso con intereses del 100%, y que acaba siendo eso, bueno, yéndose de las manos.
And now you've seen it much more standardized, consumer protection. It's become a viable industry in microfinance.
Y ahora las microfinanzas ya se ha hecho una industria mucho más viable y mucho más respetuosa también de los clientes finales.
You've seen the same in impact investing. 20 years ago, this didn't really exist. Patient capital came in, and I would say 5-6 years ago was the height of many coming in, doing business as usual, but using the rubric, the nomenclature of impact investing, but not changing the way they did anything.
Y hace 20 años empezó la inversión de impacto social y hemos visto que, y lo conocéis porque es un fenómeno que todavía sigue pasando, quizá menos en los últimos 5 o 6 años, donde se utilizaba la etiqueta de inversión de impacto social como una especie de etiqueta de estamos por la labor, pero realmente no estamos haciendo nada por ello.
And that didn't help anybody.
Y esto no acabó ayudando a nadie, evidentemente.
What's exciting to me now is that not only are consumers holding the impact investors to more account, but you're seeing regulation.
Lo que estoy viendo es que por un lado ya los clientes sí piden cuentas, responsabilidad a los agentes del sector de la inversión en impacto social, pero también los reguladores están entrando también a jugar su papel.
And so if you sell your fund, and I'll be interested in asking Francisco and José Luis this, but if you are marketing your fund as an impact fund, you actually then, at least in the US today, will be held to account for proving that you've actually had impact and not just done harm.
De manera que alguien que lleve y gestione, por ejemplo, un fondo de impacto social, va a haber un regulador detrás que le pida cuentas. Esto realmente lo estáis haciendo como decís que lo hacéis. Realmente no es solamente una etiqueta.
So I find it all good news because it means we're using language always comes first, and then you start to see real action, and we have a new generation that is demanding accountability.
Con lo cual, todo son buenas noticias. Empezamos por introducir el lenguaje, los términos, después ha venido gente que ha hecho algo, ya vemos por fin que se ha establecido un sistema para rendición de cuentas y para realmente que no se quede simplemente en términos que quedan bien. Le voy a preguntar ahora acerca de la diferencia entre tener un inversor y tener un socio, un partner. What's the difference between investing and becoming a partner in an entrepreneurial project?
Well, I mean, and again, this I could also ask Francisco and José Luis. The way we see it would be you have passive investors and you have active investors.
Tienes inversores pasivos, inversores activos.
For Acumen, so I'll speak for myself, we actually even go a step further. When we first invested, again, in entrepreneurs that were solving problems of poverty in really complex areas, we thought of ourselves as having post-investment. Too often it turned into monitoring the investment.
Al principio, cuando empezamos a apoyar inversores que querían desarrollar proyectos de emprendimiento social en áreas con mucha necesidad, nos veíamos un poco jugando el papel del inversor, pero también el supervisor, monitorizando esa labor del emprendedor.
We literally now call the post-investment work we do at Acumen accompaniment.
Lo llamamos ahora en Acumen acompañamiento a esa función.
Because our entrepreneurs are taking on some of the toughest problems in the world.
Porque nuestros emprendedores están atacando algunos de los problemas más graves del mundo.
And they're isolated, they don't have great talent reserves often.
Están solos, con poco acceso al talento humano.
Very difficult to raise capital, fighting corruption.
Les cuesta levantar capital, combaten la corrupción.
And they need partnership.
Y luego necesitan socios, compañeros.
And so we need to own the problems with them and help them solve it, even though they have to do the work themselves.
Entonces, a pesar de que son ellos los que tienen que trabajar al final, tenemos que echarnos a la espalda también como ellos los problemas que ellos quieren combatir.
And I would argue that all the best investors see themselves more in that partnership model.
Y diría que cualquier inversor digno de ese nombre se ve en ese papel, claramente.
It's just that in our world, the needs are all that much greater.
Simplemente es que en el ámbito en el que yo trabajo, en el que trabajamos, las necesidades son mucho mayores. Okay, do you agree with the following quote from economist Thomas Sowell? Voy a citar al economista Thomas Sowell. There are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. And you try to guess the best trade-off you can get. That's all you can hope for. La cita es, no hay
Very optimistic.
no hay soluciones, se transige, hay compromisos. Y lo que mejor uno puede esperar es alcanzar el mejor compromiso posible. Ultimately, you want to help companies that do well in the long run. Ellos quieren ayudar a compañías que lo hacen muy bien en largo plazo. But sometimes you need to compromise. There are trade-offs. A veces hay compromisos.
Yeah.
Hay un término medio.
I would say it somewhat differently, that there are no silver bullets.
Yo diría que no hay balas de plata.
But there are solutions.
Pero sí soluciones.
And so what excites me is the opportunity to invest and partner with those entrepreneurs that are seeking solutions and recognizing that the best ones are not ideological and fixated on their singular approach.
Lo que me gusta es invertir con empresarios que buscan soluciones y que no son, digamos, muy ideológicos, que no son demasiado obcecados o cabezotas en que su solución, tal cual la conciben, es la que va a funcionar o tiene que funcionar.
And that one of the key skills we need to be developing in our next generation, and Nieves, I'm going to ask you a little bit about it.
Y uno de los habilidades o talentos que necesitamos desarrollar en la siguiente generación, y luego preguntaría a Nieves al respecto,
is the ability to partner across sectors.
Es la habilidad de establecer relaciones de asociación a lo largo de sectores distintos.
Because you might have part of the answer, but you need to find a way to partner. Sometimes with those you think might be the enemy.
Porque a veces tú crees que tienes la solución, pero la realidad es que tienes que establecer alianzas con socios, compañeros, que a lo mejor para ti son, en primer lugar, el enemigo.
To solve the problem.
Pero es el ideal para solucionar ese problema.
We invested in a chicken company in Ethiopia.
Hemos invertido en una compañía de pollos avícola en Etiopía.
When there was really no chicken industry whatsoever in the country.
Cuando en el país no había industria avícola ninguna.
And the entrepreneurs made the assumption that this was all private sector, but they learned along the way that the rural farmers actually had much more trust in the government.
Y los empresarios de aquel momento pensaban que esto iba a ser una situación donde solamente el mercado y los empresarios iban a funcionar, pero se dieron cuenta de que, por el contrario, los agricultores contaban con el apoyo y la guía de las administraciones locales.
And it was partially that the level of curiosity, their humility, and their ability to partner.
Y fue su modestia y humildad y el grado de curiosidad de querer entender por parte de los empresarios cuál es la relación real de los agricultores con las administraciones.
That helped them build trust for themselves with the rural population they were serving and with government. That helped them share credit. That helped them ultimately build a company that served 20 million people in Ethiopia.
que les hizo entonces esa humildad, querer aprender, les dio la confianza para confiar y entender en los agricultores y en las administraciones y llegar a hacer una red que sirve a 20 millones de personas en Etiopía.
And now one of Acumen's for-profit impact funds is taking them to 10 African countries.
Y uno de los fondos con ánimo de lucro de Acumen, uno de los fondos de impacto social, está llevando este modelo a
10 African countries.
a 10 países africanos distintos como resultado de esta experiencia exitosa.
And so had they thought they had a silver bullet,
Si
they
hubieran
would have
pensado
failed.
que tenían la bala de plata, habrían fracasado.
But by recognizing that there was that the private sector could do and they could partner, they are going to be one of the largest companies in the world.
Pero pensando y llegando a la comprensión de que podían tener a las administraciones públicas y locales como socios, van a poder, si Dios quiere, llegar a ser una de las compañías más grandes del mundo. Connected to the above, you mentioned at a talk, en una charla mencionaste que el emprendedor social, social entrepreneurs need to become comfortable holding opposites in tension. El emprendedor social necesita acostumbrarse a estar a gusto manteniendo en tensión a los opuestos. Could you explain? ¿Podrías explicarlo, por favor?
Yeah, and anyone who is an Acumen fellow in this room
Cualquiera que sea un fellow de Acumen en esta sala
knows that this is something that we teach, we practice,
sabe que esto es algo que enseñamos, que se practica
and we're reminded of our own humility when we fail in doing this.
y que nos recuerda, nos ayuda a ser humildes cuando fracasamos a la hora de querer hacerlo.
But it's at every level. The easiest to talk about is obviously purpose and profit.
Pero ocurre en cualquier nivel. Uno, por ejemplo, muy fácil es propósito y beneficios, esos dos opuestos.
But where it's really difficult and where moral leadership, which insists on that ability, is during times of economic hardship, when the company needs capital and could easily leave the poor behind and serve a wealthier group of people, whether it's in off-grid solar or in solar cook stoves.
Pero es normal que en tiempos de crisis, cuando a lo mejor lo que la empresa necesita es capital, uno tenga la tensión o la tentación de olvidarse del fin, que son quizá los pobres, y empezar a atender más como su destinatario de su acción a las instituciones de capital, por ejemplo. Muy normal que esto haya ocurrido en situaciones de provisión de energía solar, por ejemplo, de los que estaba yo hablando antes.
Our most successful entrepreneurs that really exhibit that moral leadership instead will then find another approach to ensuring that the poor are continued to be included.
Los emprendedores sociales con los que trabajamos, los más exitosos son aquellos que, incluso en esos casos de conflicto y crisis económica, pueden aún así encontrar la forma de seguir sirviendo a los más pobres, a sus destinatarios reales, finales, a la vez que cumpliendo con sus necesidades, por ejemplo, financieras, cuando las cosas están apretadas.
And so one just quick example would be in cook stoves.
Un ejemplo muy rápido son estufas para cocinar, hornillos, por ejemplo.
Where cook stoves are the number one reason for deforestation in Africa.
Que son la primera razón de la deforestación de los bosques en África.
Almost 100% of households, even wealthier households, own a cook stove because of the tradition and the taste.
El 100%, incluso los hogares más ricos, utilizan estufas alimentadas con madera por tradición, hasta los más ricos, como digo, porque es tradición y les gusta incluso el sabor que da a las comidas.
What excites me is a new group of social entrepreneurs that are trying to build the cook stoves and sell them in a way that low-income women will value and can afford.
Lo que me gusta es encontrar, por ejemplo, a empresarios con los que trabajamos que están luchando por encontrar diseños de estufas para cocinar que pueden vender a las amas de casa más pobres y que las acepten también.
And again, it's very difficult for them to do, but their insistence was getting it to the poor in part, not only so that women's health could improve and their income could improve, but some of the best entrepreneurs are focused on climate crisis and protecting trees.
Y aunque es difícil, porque la batalla, lo que priman ellos es llevárselas, hacerlo a un precio razonable y asequible para las amas de casa que las van a utilizar, vemos que insisten y que no pierden en la cabeza la misión, la meta.
And after many years of pivoting, always trying to get the price down a little bit for the the low-income consumer,
Y tras muchos años de intentar arañar céntimos al precio para que el ama de casa pueda comprarlos y les sea
a
asequible,
small group of entrepreneurs realized that they had the highest quality carbon credits.
un pequeño grupo de empresarios se dieron cuenta de que tenían el mayor número de créditos de carbono, porque la lucha contra el calentamiento global también es un factor importante en toda esta ecuación de negocio.
Exactly, because you could truly count the number of trees that you were saving
Porque puedes contar el número de árboles que estás ahorrando,
with your cook stove.
que no se talan,
And now we're just watching these cook stove companies grow, but they're not keeping the carbon credit for themselves as companies. They're using the money from the carbon credits to reduce the cost of the cook stoves.
y estamos viendo que estas empresas que consiguen que los créditos de carbono, ahorrar dinero con ellos, lo están gastando en bajar el precio de estas estufitas todavía aún más,
From $40 to $8.
de $40 a $8,
So the women are the beneficiaries of doing the work of not cutting down the trees.
para que sean las mujeres las beneficiadas del trabajo de no talar más árboles.
So look at all these tensions
Así que fijaos cuántos polos de tensión
that the entrepreneur has to hold.
que tiene que mantener en tensión el emprendedor.
Profit and purpose,
El beneficio y el propósito,
generosity and accountability.
generosidad y rendición de cuentas.
Well, give the money to the women, but you still have to run a profitable company.
Haz que el dinero se canalice hacia las amas de casa, las compradoras, pero sigues teniendo que llevar un negocio bien gestionado y que dé beneficios.
And then maybe one of the more complex ones, which is not in purity,
Y uno de los polos de tensión más complejos, que no es la impureza,
is around environmental protection.
es el que se establece entre la protección del medio ambiente.
It's actually the profit and people.
Son realmente la protección del medio ambiente, el beneficio y las personas. Son tres polos.
There are many who think that carbon credits are a bad thing.
Hay muchos que piensan que esto de los créditos de carbono son malos, una cosa mala.
And yet, in terms of solving problems of poverty in a way that also stops the cutting down of trees,
Y sin embargo, a la hora de resolver problemas en los que también es importante evitar que se talen más árboles,
it's also opening up major opportunities.
está abriendo grandísimas oportunidades.
And that is the conundrum
Y ese es el acertijo
for many social entrepreneurs that are trying to solve problems for people who've been overlooked, underestimated, pushed aside.
para muchos emprendedores que están intentando resolver los problemas de los desfavorecidos y apartados de la sociedad.
That when there is no silver bullet that makes everyone happy,
Que no hay una bala de plata, repito, que haga todo el mundo contento y feliz.
but if you are driven as a builder
Pero si como constructor y creador tienes el empuje
to solve problems in ways that give the poor dignity and support the environment,
para resolver problemas que den dignidad a los pobres y a la vez que salven el medio ambiente y lo conserven,
and you're willing to hold these tensions,
y estás dispuesto a mantener estos polos en tensión,
it won't be perfect, but it will make real change possible.
quizá no sea perfecto, pero lograrás cambios reales.
And I think that's where, again, it goes back to often the loneliness of the social entrepreneur
Y de nuevo esto se conecta con la soledad que experimenta habitualmente el emprendedor social.
and why maybe one of the most important tensions that we can help hold is the individual and community. And it really goes back to Acumen Academy and why many of you are in community.
Y por eso Acumen es una labor fundamental la que hacemos en crear una comunidad para evitar y hacer más sobrellevar mejor esta soledad tan particular del emprendedor social.
So I see tensions everywhere.
Así que la tensión, como veis, está en todas partes. Le voy a preguntar, le voy a decir que unas palabras de ánimo para los emprendedores sociales que empiezan, porque tienen que asumir que no pueden abarcar y llegar a todo. Some words of encouragement for beginning social entrepreneurs. It's okay if you cannot do everything, right?
Well, first, you cannot do everything.
Bueno, primero, no puedes llegar a todo. Eso primero para empezar.
And the most important thing is truly to start.
Y lo más importante de verdad es empezar.
And to know that you're not alone, to find that community that will walk with you.
Y saber que no estás solo, que hay una comunidad que te respalda y que te acompaña en el camino.
The other thing I would say to an entrepreneur just starting at any age
También diría, a cualquier edad, seas un emprendedor social de cualquier edad,
is that at the end of the day, you won't succeed if you don't fail and you're not willing to fail.
número uno, nunca tendrás éxito si no estás dispuesto a fracasar y fracasarás.
And what our mothers and fathers told us when we were little, but too many people forget,
Y lo que los papás nos decían cuando éramos pequeños, que muchos luego olvidan de adultos,
that what matters more than anything else is your reputation.
es que lo que más importa de todo es tu reputación.
And so now, 20 years later,
Así que ahora, 20 años después,
I've made a lot of mistakes,
yo he hecho muchos errores.
We've
he
had
cometido errores,
failures.
Hemos tenido fracasos,
many surprises.
muchas sorpresas también.
But the Acumen's work is possible in some of the most complex environments on the planet because we're trusted.
Pero Acumen trabaja en los ambientes y entornos más complicados del mundo, en algunos de ellos, porque confían en nosotros.
People know we will show up.
La gente sabe que
We will
cumplimos,
tell the truth.
que decimos la verdad,
We will put the poor at the center of our work.
que el pobre es el centro de nuestro trabajo
And we will not pretend to be perfect, nor will we pretend that there are no trade-offs.
y que jamás fingiremos ser perfectos ni jamás diremos que no existen compromisos.
And that's gold.
Y eso es oro puro.
I've seen too many young social entrepreneurs
He visto a demasiados emprendedores sociales jóvenes
tell stories to make themselves look better than they are
que se inventan historias para aparentar lo que no son
and take money from investors that
y captar dinero de inversores
aren't values aligned with them,
cuyos valores no se alinean con los suyos.
and they lose a lot more than their business.
Y lo que pierden es mucho más que su negocio.
And in this moment, what we need are more that are focused on doing the hard,
Y en este momento necesitamos gente que se concentre en hacer lo difícil,
sometimes failing,
a veces fracasando,
but showing up to do it again.
pero estar ahí al día siguiente para volver a intentarlo.
And the great thing about which makes my job the best in the whole world,
Y una de las cosas por las que mi trabajo considero que es el mejor del mundo
is that I get to work with young people all across the world
es que tengo la suerte de trabajar con jóvenes de todo el mundo
who are doing just that.
que hacen justo lo que acabo de explicar.
And the Acumen Academy members
Y que los miembros de la Academia Acumen
from Spain and
España,
from elsewhere are just such important role
y de
models.
otros países son un modelo tan importante para imitar por otros.
Not only for what they do, but
No
for,
solo por lo que son,
but for how you do it.
sino por la forma en que hacen lo que hacen.
And I just couldn't be prouder to be part of it.
Y no puedo estar más orgullosa de ser parte de ello. Sí. Voy a terminar recordándole que su mentor le enseñó que a veces tienes que empujar para que lo inevitable acabe ocurriendo. Le voy a preguntar qué es ese inevitable que quiere que acabe ocurriendo para que veamos ese éxito auténtico, el real success que ella quiere ver en el mundo. Your mentor used to say that sometimes you have to push the inevitable. It's a quote from Martin Luther King. What is that inevitable we need to push for if we want the real success you want to see in the world?
Thanks. Yep.
Gracias.
My mentor, John Gardner, actually worked with Martin Luther King.
Mi mentor, John Gardner, trabajó con Martin Luther King.
And King would talk about the arc of justice.
Y King hablaba de ese arco de justicia.
And John would say, you have to push the inevitable.
Y yo le decía, pero tienes que empujar lo inevitable.
And I didn't fully understand it, but I think I understand it a lot better now.
Y aunque antes no lo entendía, creo que ahora lo entiendo mucho mejor.
And that is that if we believe that the arc of justice does move toward progress,
Y es que si creemos que ese arco de justicia avanza hacia el progreso,
we have to see it,
tenemos que verlo
and then we have to fight for it.
y luego tenemos que luchar por ello.
And so for me, once I understood that 1 out of 5 human beings were living in complete darkness,
Así que una vez que entendí que 1 de cada 5 seres humanos en el mundo vive en completa oscuridad,
140 years after Thomas Edison invented the light bulb,
140 años después de que Edison inventase la bombilla,
then it seems like it would have to be inevitable that we would finally give electricity to everyone on the
a uno le
planet.
parecería que sería algo inevitable que ya todo el mundo tuviese electricidad en sus casas.
But the truth is that doesn't happen
Pero lo cierto es que eso no ocurre,
unless some of us decide
a menos que algunos
to make it happen.
decidamos que tiene que ocurrir.
And that's what we mean by that.
Y eso es lo que significa, es empujar lo inevitable.
And so to see within 15 years a group of young, scrappy entrepreneurs that didn't know very much
Así que ver en 15 años un grupo de emprendedores que no sabían mucho cuando empezaron,
turn into a movement that has reached more than 200 and almost a quarter billion people
convertirse en un movimiento que ha alcanzado casi más de 250.000 personas, cuarto de millón,
and show the way to finally solve that problem.
y mostrarles la forma en que pueden resolver ese problema por fin,
It's really taught me in my soul
de verdad me ha enseñado en mis entrañas
that change is possible,
que el cambio es posible,
that change happens.
que el cambio ocurre,
It's not easy,
que no es fácil
and yet it only happens when we make it happen.
y solo sucede cuando hacemos que así sea.
And that's a choice.
Y eso es una opción, una elección de cada uno.
And it's a choice we have every single day, each and every one of us.
Una opción, una elección que todos tenemos que hacer cada uno de nosotros cada uno de los días.
So don't ever forget that phrase.
Así que no olvidéis nunca esa frase,
Push the inevitable.
empujar por lo inevitable para que sea posible.
Thank you for that question.
Muchísimas gracias por esa pregunta. Gracias a ustedes por la atención. Se ha acabado la media hora de la entrevista.
Thank you very
Thank you very much.
You're so awesome.
And now I would like to invite on stage the rest of the panel for the discussion that will
Now I get
ensue.
to ask questions.
Ella va a hacer las preguntas, Francisco García Paramés, José del Río, los demás panelistas.
How are we doing translation? We're not.
Y Nieves Segovia.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Everyone's going.
Sí, creo que sí. Bueno, puede estar ahí a mano.
That's a hard act to follow.
Oh, no.
Very hard.
I'm truly sorry that I can't speak in Spanish, but I'm so excited to be here with Francisco, José Luis, and Nieves, all partners to Acumen Academy here in Spain. And Maria Ana, would you just stand up, please? Because we are all only here because of all of the work that you have done. I just want to say... Truly, thank you. And Luis and I just so appreciate the questions that he asks. No one asks better questions. Thank you. But we talked a little bit about partnership, and great things aren't possible without it. And the three of you really represent great partners in bringing Acumen Academy to life. And so we only have about 30 minutes, but really wanted to have a conversation to talk about who you are and why you're here, and what you're learning and seeing here in Spain now and for the future. But I thought we would start with who each of you is. I'm going to start with you, Francisco, because you've been around this for a long time, supporting Acumen since 2006. Who are you? What do you do? And why are you here?
Okay. Shall I do it in Spanish or in English?
You can do it in any language.
Well, you know the story.
I know the story.
Okay. Yo soy Francisco García Paramés, gestor de COBAS. En COBAS, bueno, antes en otra vida empezamos a trabajar con Jacqueline en 2006, pues porque empezamos a trabajar con Jacqueline porque María Ángeles lo ha contado muchas veces, pero yo lo repito brevemente. Teníamos un proceso de donar y donábamos siempre todos los años a diversas instituciones, pero llegamos a conocer a Jacqueline, que hacía algo distinto, que era siempre con la donación, y hay que ser sincero, tenés el problema de la sostenibilidad. Hemos hecho hospitales, colegios, muchas cosas en África fundamentalmente, y al final siempre tienes el problema de sostenibilidad. Entonces, cuando sostenibilidad quiere decir que haces el hospital y el año que viene que va a pagar los suministros, etcétera, ¿no? Bueno, lo que ya sabemos todos, ¿no? Entonces, lo que nos llamó la atención de Jacqueline es que Acumen lo que hacía era algo intermedio, algo en que se buscaba que lo que estabas apoyando se autosostuviera al cabo de los años, ¿no? Y entonces eso nos parecía un cambio esencial y radical en la manera de hacer las cosas. Y a partir de ahí empezamos a trabajar con ella de diversas maneras, primero simplemente ayudando monetariamente, luego ya María Ángeles empezó a involucrarse más y acabamos ayudando a montar la fellowship en España, ¿no? Y otras cosas también que seguimos haciendo. O sea, ese es mi rol y mi papel, más o menos, ¿no? Did you get what I said?
I think I got what you said. I have to do this. But you didn't say very much about what you do at, in life.
Oh, okay. Well, we raise a family together, and which is important.
Open Value Foundation.
Yes, we do several things. I mean, one thing that is important. I mean, I personally have a strong conviction that sometimes you don't have to mix so much things in terms of to be clear and transparent. And for instance, I run a management company in which it's difficult to put the purpose into it within the company, within the structure of the company, I would say, because when you run funds for people that expect that your savings and get some return over the years, well, they expect the maximum return possible for these savings, obviously. So it's difficult to make that purpose within an organization sometimes. What it's very easy is for the shareholders that benefit and profit from that. I'm speaking in English now. I'm sorry. Okay. ¿Está bien para todo el mundo? Okay. I will speak slowly anyway. So what is important is we shareholders, los accionistas who profit from that, are the ones that have really the need and the compulsion to do something about what's going around us. And that's the big change in some sense for ourselves. So very interestingly, when we started with our foundation that is called Open Value, which focuses mainly in supporting things that are, most of them are unsustainable, let's say, and we keep that. And it's very important what Jacqueline said, when you start as a partner with someone, you keep on being a partner. I mean, even if you change a little bit your attitude and you focus on doing some other things like impact investment, people that you have been helping for 10, 15 years, you keep on doing that. I mean, you just don't leave them at the first changing your mind, right? So in Open Value, we try to do that. And from that onwards, we did some other things at Which Value School, but it's more related to investing and conscious investing, but it's not as related as what we're talking about today. But it's also very important. I mean, it's just helping people to invest better, which is always a good thing, and to save. First thing to save and then to invest. Sometimes it's even much more important to save than to invest well, as some people have shown. And then we come to impact investment, and that's mainly, I mean, I think María Ángeles should be speaking here of what she has been doing. Not really, because it's her work. I mean, I just haven't done almost anything about GSI, which is the two funds we've launched with the seed money to do impact investing, mainly to copy Jacqueline, you know. So that's good and that's bad. I mean, but competition it's always good. So we are how they call now these days frenemies or something like
frenemies.
That. Frenemies.
Paco, frenemies. We've come to that. No, I actually just one of the things that really, you know, we talk about trust-based philanthropy a lot right now. Paco and Maria Angeles were among the first trust-based philanthropists when they first came to Acumen. I hadn't even met them. And they liked what we did. They did their own due diligence, and then they would give us significant, unrestricted support for a number of years. Yeah. And I remember the first time I met them and just this incredible sense of connection. But I was also incredibly humbled and inspired that these two individuals would see something being done by someone across the world and support her on that mission, learn together, And so to see then these ideas being seeded and put to use here in Spain and also in the regions in which we operate is so joyful. It's really why we are all in this together. And my grandmother always used to say, you know, show me who you walk with, and I'll tell you who you are. If we could build more communities like that with people who share values, and then we let each other run as fast as we can run, the world really does change. So it's just been an honor. Thank you for that answer.
Yeah, welcome.
Sorry, José Luis, that I started with Francisco. It's a hard act to follow. But you have your own story for who you are, what you do, and why you are here.
Okay.
And it's connected to a mutual friend of ours who we lost tragically.
That's right. This is the first thing that I wanted to highlight. No? So we are now linked with Acumen because of my friend and partner, Jaime Carvajal. He's the one that introduced us to Acumen. Obviously, Jaime is part of the soul of Arcano. Obviously, the values that we have in the company are or reflect part of the way of living of Jaime. No? That was an amazing person. No? So yes, Arcano is an independent company. It's a partnership. In fact, we have been talking about partners. For us, partners is something that is key. No? We consider our clients partners. All the projects in which we invest, obviously, we consider their partners. And if we don't manage to get these partnership with all the people which we are basically developing relationships, we are not getting succeed. No, so we understand very well the way to function around that. No, so in Arcano we have been investing the last 17 years in alternative assets, and we have been evolving towards the sustainable and responsible investments. No? I agree with Paco. It's not easy to do that because obviously the mandate that we have from the investors is you have to get... Perdón. Now, I was explaining that the mandate that we got from the investors is you have to reach the best risk-return binomio. So obviously we have to invest in trying to get and to extract all this value, but obviously investing in a responsible way. No, we have. We began this journey towards the sustainable and responsible investments 14 years ago. At that time, there were many people that really didn't know about all these things. Even Arcano, no? We were learning at that point of time. In fact, we were the first signatories in the UNPRIs back in 2009. But since then, we have been evolving. We have introduced ESG components in all the investment committees that we have. And in a certain moment, we decided to go a step further. And we decided to develop impact products. Not in all the asset classes, because again, it's not easy, no? But we are convinced that we can get an interesting return for our investors without reducing the return. In fact, I think that there are a number of players in the market, I mean, big institutional investors that are looking for that. And in fact, they are prepared to pay a kind of premium in order to invest, for instance, in sustainable investment. So if you manage to transform something that is not sustainable in something sustainable, you will take advantage of this arbitrage opportunity. So it's not easy, again, but I think that we can combine both worlds, and this is what we are pretending. No?
Wow. Well, I'd love to hear from both of you after Nieves introduces herself about the role of ESG, how you're seeing that in the work that you do, and trade-offs, how you do manage these trade-offs and what you're seeing in Spain in the overall sector. Just to give you a warning. But Nieves, I would love to have you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and why you are here.
Well, thank you very much. Well, probably the weird one here. I, like within this panel, I'm kind of not in investment, I'm in education, which
for Acumen Academy is perfect.
Yes, well, yes. There is. I mean, we're going to talk about learning, and it's all about learning together. So I'm in the right place.
You're in the right place.
But I'm still the weird one. And I'm delighted to be here, and you're all three definitely very difficult acts to follow. So I'll do my best. So I work. I manage a group of K through 12 schools, international schools, and then a university. So we try to be lifelong companions to our students, covering the 0 to 100 years.
Wow!
Not that they need to be with us forever, but they can come
just
in
0
and
to 100.
Come in and out. No, I mean we're always there. We hope we're always there for them. And of course, in an education group such as ours, it's of course first and foremost about the students, whatever age. It's about them, and right now more than ever, it's always been about helping them find their sense of purpose in life. I always say that when all companies are now kind of in the search for their purpose, we're actually in the sector where it's about personal purpose, that we really are there to find them their purpose. And now, because of such uncertainty we're living and these times of change, etc., it's so important to be with them, but trying to light for them this idea about their impact in the world that they are facing, and that challenges them, and that they need to lead in a very positive, impactful way, meaningful way, etc. So it's not about just saying all the many things that do not work, but I mean, what's my role in this, and act, and have them to act. And because we know our students learn not so much from what we tell them, but from what we are and what we do as an education group, we need to come to places like this and get partnerships and learn. And that's why we try to broaden our whole ecosystem and have many friends here in the audience. Ourselves, we became a B Corp a few years ago, and that was quite unique in the education
Congratulations.
world. But we thought it was a way of telling them, well, our students, it's about us, but it's about you, and this is how we want you to grow. And that's just as an example. So this is why we're here, to learn.
Well, I love it. I want to push you a little on that. One, it's so exciting that you're a B Corp. I didn't realize that. But also, what are you seeing in this next generation that's coming through in terms of the challenges they see and their own agency, if you will, to do something about it? And then why Acumen Academy? Because you could partner with so many different organizations.
Well, I think the generation, it's a very exciting generation. I mean, I 100% learn from our students, whatever their age, doesn't matter, they're short or tall, doesn't matter. They have these great ideas and the passion to act, I feel. So I think it's a generation very different from ours. We know that, probably for the good, because see the world, I mean, like how broken it is. So it's good that they're different, and I think they have this. They're sensible to the challenges that they see. At the same time, and because of COVID, I feel it's a generation that's going through a lot. And I'm thinking particularly. Well, I'm thinking about all of them, but particularly that generation that's going now into. I mean.
Into university
going
now.
Into university, or from university into the
workforce.
I won't call it the real world, because everything is, but the workforce, and that really presents them with many challenges. They've gone through a lot, and that has created anxiety for all of us, but particularly for them. And they see the size of the problems out there. But nevertheless, I think they are naturally wired, and they're sensible, and they do understand the call they have, that it's about them to change. We always say this, but it's very true. And when you talk to 20-year-olds, 18-year-olds, 16-year-olds, we say, of course, our life, I mean, all generations have always inherited a better world. This will probably not be the case. So how do we establish this relationship? And it's about the trust of the young people, the new generations, to adults, to the former generations, and how we come out to them. And this is a call for everyone. Talk to them and see, well, let's see how we, the older ones, can help them change the world for the better, and we're here to co-create and to learn. So this kind of
I love
hierarchy
that.
where I'm the older and you are not patronizing, well, we have to help them. But they have so many good ideas and they have the passion, and I think they have the responsibility. I no, huge believer in the young.
I am as well. I share that. But then why Acumen Academy of all the different organizations?
Well, because it spreads across so many sectors. I think that change within our system, we can talk a little about our broken education system, which is at the heart of many of the other problems we've talked about. Imagine a world in which education worked. We wouldn't have the many problems we're having, but it doesn't. Anyway, so within the system, it's very difficult to find inspiration sometimes, to change, to understand what the problems are. And even though we do create like an internal kind of ecosystem within the system, that's not where we're going to get the solutions. So we need to look elsewhere, and we'll look to go to organizations that work across sectors, that work in different ways, that have different ways of approaching leadership and systemic change, etc. So we learn from you, and we train our teachers with you, which means that teachers
Really exciting.
in their, they will have the impact in so many other students who will eventually have that. So it's creating that, trying to create a virtuous circle about learning, really, where we all learn in different ways from each other, and for that we need to look out. And I think it's just a perfect example of ways in which we inspire the students with real examples too, because we bring in people who've done things, who are out there, to whom they can relate, and that's so important. That students can relate to those best practices, examples, people who've really walked the talk, and at the same time cross sectors, because there's so many ideas we're not going to find in the education system. They're elsewhere, and we have to look for them and for the right partners and trusted partners.
Well, that's thrilling. And I have a dream already in listening to you of doing a case study with you.
Oh, lovely.
But
Good.
But the question I want to come back to you around is, I just wrote an article for the Financial Times on the need to reimagine the business school curriculum. You're not a business school, but what should we be teaching that we're not? So I'm going to come back to you on that one.
Okay.
Because I promise these guys, we're going to straddle from ESG to who are the people coming in and that you're investing in. But this is certainly the last year has been not an easy one for investors, and certainly international investors in the markets in which we operate. Just dealing with currency fluctuations and inflation has been a wild ride. And so what you're seeing in the markets overall, but then what I had said before, social impact, ESG, how is it playing out in Europe? And it's of particular interest to me because I'm seeing culture wars around investing and ESG, with people on the right calling it woke capitalism and people on the left saying it's not going far enough. What's the conversation here in Europe, and how do we think about that for those of us who care about change?
Well, 2022 has been a tough year, as you have mentioned, and obviously this have affected all this debate around ESG issues, no? Because there are people that are saying again, okay, this is a great debate, it's nice, it's the way to proceed, but what is happening with my money, no, and with my
And these are
return.
your customers.
Yeah.
Your investors.
Yeah, that's right. So
Interesting.
now there is a debate around that, and during the last years, everything related with impact investing and ESG was in the right direction. But now there are people opening again this type of debates. I think that in order to succeed in everything related with not only impact but with ESG issues, the investors, and the regulators, and the society, everyone has to put part of the effort in order to get succeed, no? Because otherwise it's very difficult to get it. And for instance, in terms of regulation, maybe the politicians don't understand very well the way the investors proceed. the way you have to measure everything, the way you have to report what you are doing, if you have intention, not intention, which is the purpose of the investment, not only in terms of profitability, but in terms of return to the society, the impact that you are generating. And just to give you an example that for me is completely absurd. No? You know that we have different categories, Article 6, Article 8, and Article 9. In the case of real estate, so if you invest in real estate assets, you cannot get the Article 9 label if you are not investing from the beginning in sustainable assets. So explain me why, if you are investing in something that is not sustainable, you are going to do a full refurbishment, you are going to transform it into a really sustainable asset. Why can
you get credit?
Cannot get? Yeah, that's right. So I think it's completely absurd. So and why is this? Because they don't really understand the way all this asset management world is functioning. No? So if the investors go in one direction, the regulators goes in another direction, the ones that are managing the projects in another one, I think that we will not get succeed around that. So we will have to try to work all together. I think that the big investors, all the Calsters, the Calspers, etc., have a lot to say because they have the power. So if someone like Calpers or Calsters say, I want to measure this thing or this other thing, for sure everyone will go in that direction. No? But we need the help of all the players around this landscape. No?
And when you see the families invest in your private equity funds, is there a generational divide in terms of the conversation around environmental and social impact, even in difficult times?
What we perceive is that there is a transition between different generations, and this type of conversation is more interesting for the younger people. So if you... Sí, perdonar. No, I was explaining that when we have a conversation around impact or ESG issues, for instance, with a family that has their SMA investing in private equity, the youngest members of the family are really interested in all this issue, but maybe the founder, the one that is 80 years old or 70 years old, is not really interested about that and is asking, okay, but this will give me more return or not? While the young people is really interested in the other things. So I think that if once the years are going further, we will be in a better position.
This is a question that my brother, Mike, who is actually a very good friend of Jaime's as well, and he's a hedge fund guy, and I constantly have, does the young generation have to wait for the older generation to die before we see real change? Or do you see progress between the generations? You know, what is the hope in that tension that these generations are holding?
Yeah. No, I think it's evolving and evolving very, very quick. So the problem is with years like 2022, because at that
it was
time,
so hard.
Everyone rethink again about everything. But I think that this is moving in the right direction, but with up and
we just have to push the inevitable.
Yeah. That's right. Absolutely.
Francisco, how about in your worlds? The role of ESG, the kinds of investors that are demanding to see more impact. And what do these do? I mean, this goes to what I was saying about the entrepreneurs that stay the course even in the difficult times and how few they are and why it is moral leadership is different.
It's a very complicated issue. And the first thing, as we mentioned before, José Luis and myself, is people just want return because there are the savings, and that's the first and foremost thing that they think about their savings. And It's as simple as that. That's what, when they retire and when they have their life, that's what they count on, and that's a fact. That's something difficult to. Then the world is fine, but I will help on my way, on my terms. So,
Right.
So that's a very personal decision somehow. So I still see as a general rule how clients or how people that invest their savings behave as a general rule. And then we have a complication in the sense that too much focus is in the E, in the environment, and not at all in the others too, which are also very relevant for our discussion of our work talking today. And even the E is not, it's complicated, as you mentioned. In the US, very polarized. Here, not that much. But you have to find a medium term in terms of speed. How quickly can you do things? And the experience of the last 12 months, it's very open-eyed in that sense, because the security of supply is also important. But also in who can be part of the solution, because it seems that oil and gas companies cannot be part of the solution. And I can give you an example that we are shareholders in a company that is involved in Namibia. Namibia is 4 million people. This is one of the poorest countries in the world. All the energy they get is from South Africa, which is mainly coal. And as you know, if you read the press these days, in South Africa, they have cuts in electricity of 8 hours a day today probably, meaning that the refrigerators are closed, and the businesses cannot perform. I mean, it's a chaos now in South Africa. And they export coal to Namibia. Well, in Namibia, they have a couple of thermal plants that run on coal. We own a gas company that has just found gas off the coast of Namibia. And they are proposing the government to change from coal into gas. That, as you all know, gas has something like 35% less CO2 emissions than coal. So anyone in the world can say that this company is not helping the climate, is not helping the people in Namibia, is not helping the world. I mean, I have a clear idea that these people are helping. So these people have to be part of the solution. It's not black and white. It's not so even that discussion in the E is complicated, very complicated. Who can be part of the solution and who don't? But also we have to focus on the other two things, which is what we're talking to do, social. I mean, we are long-term investors. We invest in a company for 20 years, so we cannot take the risk that these companies are doing the wrong thing. Because a surprise at any time, because of you are cutting corners, as you say in English. I mean, because you go to the limits, so you have to be very careful. So, in a sense, when you are a long-term investor, you have the ESG on your mindset, on your code, because I mean, you don't want surprises. One morning you wake up and there's a big surprise. So, in some sense, that it is, and in some sense, that's what we have to push. I mean, to put particular agendas here and there, it's very complicated. But so many unintended consequences of our acts that it's a very complicated discussion.
It is a very
not much value.
It is a very complicated discussion, and what I'm hearing you also talk about is the imperfection of it, and going back to the tensions. For anyone who works in Africa, there are many African presidents who feel deeply angry at the environmentalists, saying, well, you all sound like colonialists, let us have our chance. And so how do you hold the two with a lot more humility than we're holding it? Yeah. So I really appreciate what you were saying there.
It's very true, because actually we're quite involved in the gas market and we know it. And some of the countries say, okay, I have a lot of gas, I am allowed to export that to Europe or to China, but I'm not allowed to have a gas thermal plant in my country. I have not the funding from the World Bank. So that's nonsense.
It's a very complicated world, and yet we are seeing real change. I'm seeing it in that, really for the first time, significant corporations are coming to say, I make perfume, or I make I'm in the coffee business or cosmetics, and we know that we won't have customers unless we can prove that people are being paid well and their sustainability. Can you build that for me? And I said, well, that's not really our model unless we can find an entrepreneur. But the fact that corporations for the first time are realizing what you were saying, if you don't think about this for the long term, you won't have customers. That's exciting, even though it's so daunting because so much needs to be put into place. So.
No, what it is too is that probably that there was 20 years ago, and you know that, I mean, you have been working with this for more than 20 years, but there was not this kind of attitude I mean, this trade-off didn't exist. I mean, you weren't in the business of making money. Now some people start the business with this trade-off in their minds. So it's not only making as much money as possible, but having this impact in this particular area that I want to do. And that's very important. That's why our funds, your funds, what we are starting can be successful because there is a counterparty there, which is key in trying to do these kind of things.
Yeah.
Perhaps you feeling the same change also.
I see huge change at all levels. And I actually think that part of our success is that there are senators in the United States that are really coming after us because the status quo is starting to shift. And to me, that's very good news in an exciting way. We just have to put our seatbelts on, as they say. Nieves, you are creating these customers, the workforce that is starting to demand real change. What would you change in the current educational curriculum to better prepare young people for this world? A world of very strong status quo, where we're all part of it. Because what these two men are talking about are not the big bad investors. They're talking about pension fund holders, people who are thinking long-term about their savings. It comes from everywhere. And yet we're having a different conversation. What would you change about the curriculum for this next gen?
Well, so much. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, so much. And before you mentioned business schools, and I was kind of thinking, well, that's really too far off. That's too late, and that's for just a few.
I agree.
It has to be really for everyone and from very young age. Because there are so many ways, and the younger the children, I mean, the more open their minds are to new ways of thinking, and they more sensible to this kind of, they grasp the world in different ways. Only we just tell them how to grasp it, and then they lose their ingenuity and so many things, which would be so helpful for the world we're living in right now. I would say, start very, very early. I mean, from primary, in ways that or early childhood, in ways that we're not mandating. I mean, when we think about our curriculum, we think about a subject, we think about content, and I think it's so much about the school or the university modeling that change. It's like, we want innovative students, but the school needs to be innovative. I mean, it cannot be a traditional school trying to raise very innovative and open mind thinkers, whatever. So we need to model that change. And for that, there needs to be also a different mindset in education organizations, which tend to be very traditional. I mean, we have this conservative kind of approach. That's what we were there for, actually, to keep the status quo. So now we're asking the education system to say, no, you need to be part of the change, and you need to really promote that, because in your hands, if it's in your hands, you can make it so much quicker, because it won't be about solving problems, it'll be about avoiding them from happening. So we need to start very young. There are so many ways. I mean, our role, I feel, is to just facilitate what's already in them. For example, we have, just an example, an EdTech accelerator. And so that's called SEK Lab, and we do a junior version in the schools, and that's SEK Lab Junior, and we ask them just to come up with their ideas, whether they turn them into a startup or not, doesn't matter. I mean, they're 12, 13, 14. The beauty of this project is that every year they do this fair where they present their projects. Some are phenomenal, and they've even sold patents, I mean, at 7-year-olds and 16-year-olds. But the beauty of it is that over 90% of their projects have a social impact. It's in their minds. We don't tell them. We don't tell them, oh, you need to do this. No, they look around. They see, well, I see my grandmother, and there's this problem that could be solving. I see my community. I see my neighborhood. I see whatever. My younger brother. My whatever. And they come up and they show up. And they show up with ideas. So our role in schools and universities is just to help facilitate them, encourage them, don't suppress it. Don't try to make it just about the traditional content, about, the whole system needs to change for that in so many more ways. And it has to be more flexible, has to be more oriented to building those competencies which are needed and not so much be building content that's everywhere, etc. So I wouldn't talk about, of course, specific content, about the models of way in which to which they can relate, whether it's from that larger ecosystem in which schools and universities are just like formal education is just a small part, where we have this conversation with so many more, where we learn and we go back on to our campuses and we share what we learned, and then giving them ways like that can be tools, of course, to create labs and contests and environments where they can connect with other universities, for example, or other schools and share their ideas and best practices with others, like they can do that digitally or there's so many ways just to help them and encourage them and celebrate.
And build a mindset towards solving problems rather than... Yeah, and for that we need to change first the mindset of traditional learning environments, because that's the key. That's the key idea, changing their mindset. I love that. Well, helping them with their mindset. We early on, when we were young and crazy, we did Acumen Kids Day, where we would, it would just be an amazing day, but we would have 8-year-old to 14-year-olds come into our offices, and we would end the day with a business plan competition. And I'll never forget when the 8-year-olds came forward with a business called Popcorn, and they said, Jacqueline talks about what it means to be a full human being. And the way we see it, Acumen has a lot of it covered, with health and water and energy and agriculture. But if you really care about being a full human with dignity, Acumen's missing one important element, and that's fun. And I thought, good point. Awesome. And so Popcorn was designed to get video games and other fun games to really poor kids around the world.
You see,
and
they're always right. They're always right.
It was so exciting to hear these 8-year-olds telling me about what it means to be human and what I had missed. And I do think that that's just so important. So I've been told by Alvaro that we're at time, and so I just wanted to know if we could end with quickly each of you in a way where Luis ended. One piece of advice first, one thing that gives you hope right now, knowing that particularly you two have endured a very rock and roll last 12 months. But one thing that really gives you hope, and one piece of advice you would have to young or not so young people who want to be part of making change, and then the same for you. One thing that gives you hope, and one piece of advice, knowing that we're at time. So very quickly. Who wants to start?
Okay, what gives me hope is that, we know what has to be done, and slowly we are doing it as a world, and what we can do is try to quicken that pace, to do it a bit faster. But I think it's clear, the information that we have now, the transparency we have now, makes things much more easy to copy what other people have done and do the right thing in everywhere. But it's becoming commonplace. So I'm quite optimistic.
And one piece of advice?
I know. I know. No idea. Let me think about that afterwards.
I don't know if we'll have time, but we may come back or not.
Okay. No, my hope is the people. So really, I think that the things are changing. So what we are perceiving is when some young professional join our firm, they have very clear certain values. They don't want just to work in a place in which they are going to earn a lot of money or whatever. So they have very, very clear ideas, and I think that this is changing the world. It is part of what we have to do, no? And connectivity is helping as well. So I think that all the investments around digital infra, etc., will connect all the world, and this will help us to navigate this very, very complex world that we have today.
And do you have any advice?
Not really.
There you have it. Nieves.
Okay, well, you give me hope. Younger generations give me hope, and organizations like Acumen give me hope, because it's a way to connect, to create, ecosystems which we can all learn. And a piece of advice: think about education when you think about your projects, your life, etc. Don't think that it's, even in Spain, that it's all done, or that we have this formal education system, whatever. There's so much to be done, and this sector just needs change so much. Coming from a different place with a different mindset, that we need you all. Well, maybe, yes, I mean, there are other sectors are important, I know. But, think about education, because that's at the heart of everything else.
I love it. A great pitch.
Yeah, because when I advise, yeah, sure. You just gave me a couple of minutes, and I would say I would advise to look around, see what is working over there, copy it, and try to improve it.
Woohoo!
As simple as that.
Great advice. And what gives me hope as well is just being able to sit here with these three partners who looked around Spain, and particularly at a time when there were divisions within the country, as well as economic and other social and environmental problems, and take a bet on the next generation, identifying people across sectors, across class, ethnicity, geography, sector, and to see 66 people growing this year by at least 20 or so. Do we know how many, Maria Angeles? So another 20, and the difference that 80 people, 85 people can make in a nation, in the world, as with new business models, and also standing as role models. That's living your hope. That's not just believing your hope. And just on behalf of Acumen, I want to say thank you to all three of you for everything that you've done. Maria Angeles and everyone for coming. Thank you for this conversation. Luis, thank you for what you do.